Hello, and welcome to When Laid Off, Paid Off, Redundancy Success Stories. Coming up in this episode.
Feeling like I wasn't really valued after all, had it all been for nothing.
Terrifying concept of like, find your passion and your true purpose and your life will be fantastic tomorrow. Oh, it's just not like that, is it?
You're listening to When Laid Off, Paid Off, the show about providing positive stories and lessons to help you find the silver lining if you're struggling with the uncertainty or challenges of redundancy. I'm Liu Batchelor, and I'm a presenter, content producer, and TEDx curator. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Another Door. This episode comes from coach Emma Clayton, who after 20 years in a corporate career doubted herself, her confidence, and her contribution. However, after overcoming her imposter syndrome and her self-doubt, she was able to go on to help other people facing similar challenges. Later in this episode, we'll also hear from Eleanor Tweddell, redundancy mentor at Another Door, and author of Why Losing Your Job Could Be the Best Thing That Ever Happened to You, who'll be sharing with us her insight into how to identify both your value and your passion. But first, let's hear Coach Emma Clayton's story.
My name's Emma Clayton. I left school when I was 18 and got a job for a large global corporation, and I was there 20 years later. And it was actually in my 20-year anniversary week that I got the news that I was being put at risk of redundancy. Needless to say, I took the redundancy, and since then I have been working as a life coach and mentor to women who, like me throughout my entire career, never really felt as confident on the inside as they came across on the outside, because they were struggling on the inside with anxiety and low self-esteem and imposter syndrome and not feeling quite good enough. And I helped them confidently claim their dream career and lives. In terms of how the news landed for me, how I felt, it was really mixed emotions. So I was the head of strategy and operations for the team. So I kind of knew it was coming. And when I got the confirmation, it was the certainty I needed to work with. That was despite, on the other hand, feeling like I wasn't really valued after all, had it all been for nothing. Am I just a number after all? I took it really personally up here, but kind of in here, I knew that everything was going to be okay. And I think those fears, those worries are really quite natural when you're faced with this situation. In terms of what I did with it next, I was fortunate that I already had a holiday booked. So I fully intended to use that break to get my head around, well, if I did take redundancy, what would I do? Because this is all I've known. So I did things like I looked at the pros and cons of staying versus leaving. I looked at my passions. What was I really passionate about? I was really passionate about my own self-development and self-improvement journey that I'd been on through my 30s. And I guess I was fortunate because I had like this, it was almost like the push I needed to say, yeah, I need to take all the skills and the things that I'm really good at, my strengths from my corporate career, and put it into like my personal passion. So that's when I decided that actually I was going to take it and what I was going to do with it. I guess I also learned that I'm a bigger risk taker than I ever thought I was. What's next is really exciting. So in the last 3 years, I've just thrown myself into like deeper and deeper into my own self-development journey as I've started to put my work out there and help other women on theirs. And if I would leave you with any tips, I would just encourage you to step away and just to look at, if money wasn't an issue, what would you do with your life? And is there something that you can turn into an opportunity? A quote for me, which is one I've lived my life by, is everything happens for a reason and everything's going to be all right, as Bob Marley would say. And I wish you all the best in your next move.
What I love about Emma's story is how she took an experience that had been a challenge to her in the past and used it to help others. A really great example of turning an obstacle into an opportunity. I think the point that Emma made at the beginning about uncertainty being the thing she needed most was really interesting. Yes, uncertainty can make us feel really uncomfortable and sometimes be really frustrating. But the more we can get comfortable with being uncomfortable, the more we can push the boundaries of what we know is possible of ourselves and for our lives. We'll hear what Eleanor thinks of Emma's story and what advice she'd give people suffering similar challenges. Eleanor, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
So, in Emma's story, we heard her talking about this idea of like not feeling valued, that she was just a number and had it all been worth it. What would your advice be to someone who needs to feel that confidence in their self when they're going out and ultimately they've got to sell themselves, be it to a new employee or to kind of put themselves out if they're starting a business? What would your advice be to people going through that sort of thing?
I think it's the first part of actually moving on well. If you can nail this part, the rest will be a breeze. Because what happens is you're going through all these emotions of rejection, and I think Emma kind of touched on the emotional side of it. And your inner chatter starts telling you all these stories about yourself. And because you've just got yourself to kind of deal with now, you can then, it can go either way. You can start convincing yourself of all of those things, like, oh, I've been found out, it was me, I didn't try hard enough. It's almost like a bad breakup. It's a relationship breakup when you're like, it's not me, it's you, it's, all of those things in your head, and you're desperately sitting there trying to think, what happened? I need to talk to them. I need more. I need them to tell me why me. If we embrace that and just accept it and say, that's fine. It's a bad relationship breakup. My inner chatter is going to be working overdrive, trying to protect me, trying to work all this out. I accept that. I'm just going to wallow a little bit. Just for a little bit of time, just give yourself a break and just sit in that space. Then when you've accepted the shock, you can then take a breath and go, okay, move on. Time to forward face. Enough of this chatter, and really tune into what is my sort of voices inside really telling me. Am I really not worth it? Of course I am. I've been doing this for ages.
Yeah.
I'm still me. And tuning into that inner chatter and really trying to own it and control it has got to be the way forward. And it's hard work. I'm not underestimating that. I never would, and it took me a long time to really grab hold of this, but when I realized that's what was going on, it makes it so much easier, because you're like, right, I'm owning this, time to walk forward.
Awesome. And you mentioned in there about this idea of wanting potentially to go back and ask why and for feedback. Is that something that is possible, or is it non-advisable? Because there's an element of, okay, well, feedback's always good, but is it in this situation?
Forget feedback, just get over it, move on. I think we can dwell a little bit too much on feedback as if it's got answers. So I wouldn't dwell on it too much, because it's just someone's opinion. I always think that great feedback is actually advice, okay, that you can then listen to openly and go, right, is that good advice that's going to help me? Can I do something with this, or am I resisting it? What I see is too many times sometimes they do get feedback. Especially maybe not so much when you get made redundant, but when you go for interviews and things like that, you do get feedback. And then what do? You sit on it and you argue with yourself about the feedback. Well, that's not fair. Well, this and this and that. What was the point of that? I think it's advice that you can then say, okay, how is this going to help me move forward? I think feedback has to completely be reframed. I would say once you've lost your job, once you've been made redundant, detach from all that stuff as soon as possible. And future forward, face forward, and think, okay, who am I now? What is fueling me forward? Forget that door that's closing.
Okay, so with that in mind, and this idea of, kind of looking inside the answers that you probably know are already there, but really kind of trusting in yourself, how can we find that passion, or what's maybe the process if we've never taken that time out to look for it? What would you say is like the first step to starting to kind of reflect back inwards?
Yeah, and passion is terrifying kind of concept, isn't it? And that's kind of what we're hearing, this terrifying concept of like, find your passion and your true purpose and your life will be fantastic tomorrow. Oh, it's just not like that, is it? And I certainly didn't get that at all for about a year. Like, I was reading all this stuff and trying to get involved in, coaching and things, and find your passion. It just overwhelmed me, because I thought passion was like a hobby or something. And I was like, don't have any hobbies. I don't have any passions. This is just making me feel worse. Like, this is actually making me feel like, what have I been doing all this time? I started to just be a bit more gentle about it and say, well, hang on a minute, what's interesting me? Mm-hmm. What kind of just makes me curious? What just kind of makes me go, oh, I'll read that. Really simple. I started so basic, like just in a newspaper, get a Sunday newspaper, flick through it. What's just made me stop and read? What could I talk about on Mastermind as a topic? That was one question that I thought, what really could I just go on and on and on about for a very long time? So it's actually gentler questions like that. And I give the example of things like, so I was talking to a guy a couple of months ago, and he came out of a corporate job, and we were just chatting away and talked about this guy, he's gardening. He's noticing some of his neighbours were struggling with the gardening, so we're going to help them. And we were like, but he was really enjoying it. And he was like, this gardening thing, I actually quite like it. Like, I'm mowing the lawn, but now I'm thinking, bit of redesign here, redesign there. Thinking about now, if he can train to be a landscape gardener. And that was like, that's been a couple of months of just like helping out with something he can see as a problem. Actually realizing, well, it's not just that. I could up my game here and use my design skills. He was like a design background, and do something completely different. That's not going to be overnight, but he could gradually see himself, just doing something complete. Now, the next day, he's not going to be a world famous landscape designer, but it started with him just going, do you know what? I've got a bit of time on my hands. I'll go and help my neighbours.
Okay. Yeah.
Be curious, see where it goes. So I think, passion and stuff can be a bit overwhelming. Again, like we've heard that. So just be a bit more gentle with it and say, what's my interest? And when you start looking, there's examples everywhere of people who've done it. So like Marie Kondo with her, declutter the world mission. That's just someone who really likes tidying and organizing. Joe Wicks, absolutely passionate about, there's loads of people who are passionate about their exercising, their specialism in that. So I think it's just that. What interests you? What could you talk a lot about? And what are you willing to do more research on and find interesting about talking to people who already do it? Or, just that's the key to it, I think.
Okay, nice. So a very subtle but very kind of key switch in the word from passion to interest. Really like it. And was there anything else in particular you noticed about Emma's story that kind of stood out for you, or that you think is interesting, or kind of you'd like to comment on?
Well, we've kind of touched on this thing about worth. I think it's a biggie, but I think it's more what we're valuing as our identity and what we believe who we are, if that makes sense. So we're sort of believing who we are. So that our worth and our value is kind of created by our external people judging us. Yeah. But if we kind of sit in that space of, but really, who am I and what do I want to be, gives us different answers. Okay. So my example was kind of similar, as in I would think, well, I'm a corporate person. I've done well in corporate comms, and that's who I am. That's my specialism. That's all I can do. I can only apply for jobs with the same job title. That's it. Whereas if give yourself a little bit of that space and say, but what are my interests and what are my strengths and what's the breakdown of that? Then it gives you different answers to actual possibilities. So I think that's kind of, it combines actually the passion part as well, where you're more than just a job title, you're more than that identity, but you're having to do quite a lot of work of almost dissecting yourself, almost deconstructing who you are to find it. So that's what kind of went through my mind around sort of that sort of deconstruction to find different solutions. Which might be closer than you think, might feel very far away, but actually they're really closer because they are your strengths already. They are what you're doing already. Just because this job title's making you feel like you're one thing.
Okay, very nice. I like it. So this idea of open those eyes, what are you interested in, looking at what's already around you. Love it. Eleanor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was Eleanor Tweddell. For more advice, support and tips from Eleanor, head over to www.anotherdoor.co.uk. Thank you for watching When Laid Off Paid Off, Redundancy Success Stories. I hope you managed to find some hope and inspiration from this episode. I'll see you next time.